My name's Mary and I'm an alcoholic. And I'm grateful to be here and grateful to be sober. My dry date is the 10th of August 1984. My group is the Markham Village group. I changed. The Third Tradition group in Markham, Ontario. I have a sponsor. She has a sponsor and I sponsor. And I am so delighted to be here and so grateful to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. That has taken me from the depths. I mean, we are the luckiest people in the world. We are the luckiest people in the world. You probably heard I'm not from Canada. I found Canada the way Columbus discovered America. I was looking for something else. But I am so grateful to Canada because that's where I found sobriety. You know, I'm really glad they had that state countdown because I was thinking, Kingsport, it's not a big place. Half of them must be alcoholic. One thing before I go into my story. So somebody just said to me earlier, you used to smoke ganja with Bob Marley, right? I said, no. I never smoked ganja. And Bob Marley didn't like me. And I'll tell you about that story later if I remember. And I want to say I've spoken with these speakers over many, many years. And every one of them has been on fire. Fire. Everyone. And Charlie, you spoke to my soul. You spoke to my soul. Thank you. And, it's amazing. I've been doing this thing a lot for, trying to get this change of personality and doing all of this stuff for so many years. And it's amazing how much I had to know to realize how little I know. Because I learn all the time. I'm forever learning. And I have a lot of my teachers right here. And for that I am so grateful. On Tuesday I go back to Scotland to visit my family. And I will be welcomed. And and it won't be like it used to be. They used to say to me when I was little, and I used to say to my family, I'm going out to play, they'd say, see if you can get yourself adopted. And I caused a lot of havoc, but because of the steps, and I'm able to go back and see my old aunt, my last remaining aunt, the one that came and took me off the street in 1980. I'm able to go and see my brother. I'm able to go and see my cousins and just walk on the old sod that my ancestors have been walking on for hundreds of years. And I think that Scotland sent a lot of alcoholics to Tennessee. So I was born in 1943 during the war. I was born on high alert, And I needed something to calm me down. I needed alcohol, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that until I took my first drink at 25. But growing up and trying to live in a place in a world that I never felt I belonged in. If there is a predisposition to the illness of alcoholism, this is how it manifested for me. All my life I felt different. All my life I felt less than. All my life I felt as if I was on the outside looking in. I had an unbearable, unsheddable burden of self-consciousness. Self-consciousness, so everywhere I went, I thought people were looking at me and judging me and finding me wanting. I never ever could live in my skin. I was filled with fear. And what happened to me was eventually that fear became aggression when I was 10. And I started getting into a lot of fights and a lot of trouble. And it seemed to me at some level I was always looking for God. And yet I was born into a good Roman Catholic home. But the faith of my fathers did nothing for me. I lived with my granny, my granddad. My father was at war. My grandmother had 2 sons killed in the war. And she still loved God. And they had no anger. And I was filled with anger. I was filled with resentment from I was little. And I don't know when I started running away from God, but it was at a very early age. I remember being in Scotland, they used to come and vaccinate us. I was 7 years old and they came to vaccinate me against something, and I don't remember what it was. And I said, you can't put a needle in my arm because that's where my soul is. They said, your soul's not in your arm. I said, it is, because I used to see people with these big round marks in their arm from vaccination. So they brought a priest. The priest said, your soul's not in your arm. I said, where is it? He said, I don't know, but it's not in there. I said, you don't know either. I was 7. And then every year my family would take me to Ireland because I'm an Irish Scot. And my family used to look at my mother and they used to say to my mother, she's not right, you know. And if you're not right in Ireland, you're not right anywhere, let me tell you. And every year my family would take me and they would take me to this beautiful old cathedral. Bob's been there, he's seen it. They have this martyred saint's head in a case on the altar. Just his head. He was martyred by the English 300 years ago. His head's still in there. It's all black and burnt, and he's still got teeth. That used to fascinate me, because teeth are a rare commodity in my country, you know. And here's this 300-year-old guy with teeth, you know. And my family used to say to me, I want you to sit here and study Blessed Martin. Or Blessed Oliver Plunkett, because he really loved God. And I'm sitting looking at this blackened head and I'm thinking, if he really loved God and that's what happened to him, I want something more than that. Thank you very much. I don't know what happened to me, but then at about 12 I started having panic attacks, much like Bill Wilson did. I started having panic attacks. I started having this fear of eternity. I started thinking too much, and it was not a good place to be. And the only way I could get out of that was to be crazy. And I behaved crazy. I went absolutely crazy. And broke my mother's heart, got into a lot of trouble. And at 15, I was being educated by nuns, and one of the nuns hit me with a ruler, and I figured if she could give it, she could take it. And they don't laugh at that anywhere else, but so I got expelled, and here's the thing. I had little hints and guesses along the way about God. And I did not realize how separated from God I was. And that it seems to me, like with a lot of us alcoholics, that God is always trying to get our attention. Because we have a spiritual malady. And it manifests itself in different ways. And the Mother Superior said to me, Paul, you wait for your mother to come and pick you up. I want you to sit outside and memorize that sign above my door, because it might do something for your measly little life. And I looked at this sign and it said, of courtesy it is much less than courage of heart or holiness, but in my walks to me it seems that the grace of God is in courtesy. And way back then I wanted nothing to do with the grace of God, and I wanted nothing to do with courtesy. But many years later, coming through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, having lived on the street, having been taken up and used and thrown away like an old piece of used cloth, I know it was the grace of God that brought me to you. And it was the great courtesy that you extended to me that had me stay here. I am so grateful to you for taking somebody like me and just loving me back to health and loving me back into being a woman, a human being, because I had lost all of that. And for all of you people who are new here, I am so happy that you are here. Because this is the place where miracles happen. And if you hear something in my story and you say, well, that hasn't happened to me, say yet. Say yet. Because if you be an alcoholic of my type, and you go back out there, it will. Little by little. The dragon will get you. The rapacious creditor. So 15, I'm out of school, and I don't know if you know much about Glasgow, Scotland, but we've got 2 football teams and 2 religions and 2 gods. And there's a lot of fighting. And I don't look like it today because AA has done a good job on cleaning me up. But I used to fight in street gangs. And I got into a lot of trouble and broke my mother's heart. And then I wanted to make her proud, and I decided to go into nursing. I was 16 and a half, and they said, you know, they needed nurses. If you had to sit an IQ test, that's something a lot of Al-Anons don't give us credit for. Alcoholics have high IQs, but Al-Anons don't realize it. Right? So I sat this IQ test, and they took me in to study for my registered nursing. The only thing, it wasn't a good career choice. It wasn't a good career choice. First of all, I'm obsessed with death. I don't like blood, and I hate touching sick skin. So, like dressing wounds, no, I can't dress. I might inflict a wound, but I ain't dressing it. Anyway, I hung in there for a couple of years to make my mother happy. And then I left, and I decided I was going down to London, England. And in London, England, it was the 60s, and the Beatles were just coming out, and the Stones, and it was really a place where everything was happening. And I didn't drink. I was afraid to drink because I'm Celtic background. And I certainly didn't do any of that other stuff they were doing, but what I did was I just went and danced. I danced to the music. I danced to the music. You know, one of my favorite songs is that I used to play. You know, you have a song you play over and over and over again when you're drinking. Mine was Masquerade by George Benson. Searching but not finding understanding anywhere. I'm lost in a masquerade. I was forever searching, looking for somebody to understand me. And it wasn't until I was age 40 and came through the doors of AA that I found somebody who understood me. I was so fascinated by getting somebody to understand me. I remember my first date, and the guy's getting very, very heavy and hot and sexy with me. I'm not really involved because I'm too busy thinking about myself. And I'm just kind of watching him, you know, and then I thought, I wonder what... So I said to him, so what do you think about death? He said, I think you should go home now. At age 21, I joined British Airways. It was then BOAC, British Overseas Airway Corporation, based in London, and I was an overseas escort. Oh, it's a really good effort. I don't know what that meant was that if there was, you know, people came to London for surgery and they needed someone to travel back with them, I'd travel back with them, or I'd go collect them and bring them, or... You know, that was a job I did, and I loved it. And I traveled all over the world. The only thing is, again, because you've got this neurosis that Bill Wilson talks about so well, if you read his writings. I'm completely neurotic. I'm up in a plane with all these people. I don't like people. I'm claustrophobic. You know, I just, not a good career choice. And I kept on trying to get jobs where I had a uniform, because if I had a uniform on, I would look like you. If I had something, I would look like you, because I felt so isolated, so alone, so different. No matter what I did, I couldn't fill that up. I was absolutely encased in self. Encased in self, so much so that I used to wish, when I saw 3 people standing talking, or 4 people, I thought, I wish I could be one of them and walk away from myself. I wish I could walk away from myself. And the nearest thing I've ever had, before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous to read the Release Me of the Bondage of Self, was when I read a poet, an American poet called Anne Sexton, who died of alcohol-related problems. She said, I have a body and I cannot escape from it. I would like to fly out of my mind, but it's out of the question. It is written in the tablet of human destiny that I am stuck here in this human form. That being so, I'd like to call attention to my problem. I was trying to call attention to my problem. I'm stuck in self, and I'm afraid of myself, and I don't know how to get out. So what am I going to do now? Well, let's get married. I have been married with alarming regularity. I love getting married. I just don't have any follow-through. What happens to me is I fall in love, and him and I are like Velcro. And we get married, and after about 3 weeks, I can hear him breathing 3 doors down. Did he always breathe like that? You know. The problem is me. But anyway, I married this beautiful man that at that time was in Jamaica, rather in London. And he was a very cultured man. He was a lovely man. He married a figment of my imagination. And he took me to live in Kingston, Jamaica. And in Kingston, Jamaica, I had everything. I loved Jamaica. I loved it. It's so beautiful. And I loved the people. Because, you see, that's me. You see, I keep changing people, places, and things. I don't know there's a solution for me in alcohol from the madness that I'm going through. I don't know that alcohol will be my release. So I'm trying everything. And I am in love. And I do love this country. I love Jamaica. I love the people. I settled right in there. And after about a year, my first son was born. And here's what happened at the happiest time of my life. The happiest time in my life. I'm looking at this little boy. He's just been born, and we're home, and we're in this room, and it's got louvered blinds, and outside is the heliconia, and the birds of paradise, and the beautiful garden, and the beautiful birds. And all of a sudden, I know I'm going to lose my mind. I've been walking around the world for 25 years trying to fit in. And now I've had this child, and I'm going to lose my mind. And I start screaming. And they bring a doctor. And the doctor wants to give me an injection. And I had a friend, Kirsten. She lives in Georgia now. Danish girl. She came, she said, give her a drink. I'd never had a drink. Jamaica has 150 proof rum. How sweet it is. I just knew that every little thing was going to be all right. And I started drinking. And I didn't drink copious amounts. I just drank every day. Because, you see, I had found my magical elixir. That's what alcohol did for me. I didn't drink to get high. I was born high. I just needed a little bit of shush. Just a little bit of shush from my crazy mind. You see, I am one of those that Bill talks about in the big book when it says there are those too who suffer from grave mental and emotional disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. I am one of those. And some of you might be too. Because you're not right if you're here. I got a freedom that I had wanted all my life from alcohol. When I was going crazy in Scotland, when I was like 13, I used to run away from home all the time. And I thought, I'm going to run up to the Highlands because it's just empty. It's empty. And it's beautiful, where Braveheart lived. I'm going to be naked and paint myself blue. And I'm going to run around shouting, freedom! And I couldn't get freedom. There were always people telling me what to do. There was always people looking at me. There was always people looking at me and judging me and finding me wanting. But I drink a little alcohol and I feel free. The magic of it. Nothing else could have done it for me. And after 4 years, my second son was born, and I have to say I drank every day. I carried that child because I had lost the power of choice and drink by the time I was 4 years sober. I lost the power of choice and drink. And I never thought about it back then. And my little boy was born all right. And I don't think that was because the grace of God, as Bob said, is there for everybody. But he was just okay. I've seen children born with fetal alcohol syndrome, and it breaks my heart. But my boy was all right. And I'm going crazy in Jamaica. My husband, he's developed, like all of my husbands, they developed nervous conditions, after marrying me, and they were known to, yeah, because, I'm a warrior, and my husband used to lecture me, and I tell him, if you drop asleep tonight, I'll kill you. And and so sometimes I'd wake up and he locked himself in the room, and he sent his parents up to talk to me, and then a lot of my friends at that time were drinking Sensimilia. No, not drinking it, smoking ganja. And they used to say to me, Mary, come try a little ganja. Look how the liquor's making your eyes red. And I said, I don't want nothing that's going to screw up my brain. I'll stick to liquor. Thank you. And I used to live on Hope Road in Kingston, Jamaica, which is where Bob was given a big old great house, and Bob lived in Hope Road in Kingston, Jamaica. And Bob didn't like me, and I didn't like Bob. I didn't like Bob because he was a pothead, and he, believe me, Bob was a great humanitarian. I used to watch Bob. I could see right into his garden. I'd see all the poor people coming. He'd feed them. He used to say, if it's just for me, I don't want it. He was a humanitarian. He used to care for people. I was selfish, self-centered, and self-will run riot. Bob didn't like alcohol because it's against the Rastafarian religion. And Bob had a BMW and I had a BMW. And one day I'm in the garage, Mullen's garage, and I'm standing there with my Dunhill cigarette holder, half in the bag, swaying in the breeze, thinking about myself, waiting for them to fill my car. And Bob drove in his BMW, a couple of brothers in the car, and he shouts over to me, he says, you see, you're a hedonist and a narcissist, and you don't care about anybody but yourself. He says, you think you're so smart, you drink that alcohol. He said, if you think you're so smart, what does BMW stand for? I said, Bavarian Motor Works. He says, no, man, it means Bob Marley and the Wailers. A lot of times I don't tell that story, and people will say, I brought my sponsor to hear you tell that story. I think, what about my suffering? What about... In the end, as with Bob, Bob used to say, you're running and you're running and you're running away, but you can't run away from yourself. That's what I used to do. I kept running away from myself. And things were getting very hot for me in Jamaica. I was causing a lot of problems. I was getting barred from the country clubs. And I decided I was going to leave the island. And I divorced my husband. And he didn't want me to take the children. And I said, if you don't let me take my children, I will write something in the newspaper about you. I was a horrible person, horrible. My children were 3 and 7. And I took them to Scotland, and my family told me about my drinking. And a man I had known for many years said, let's get married. I'm a Canadian citizen. I said, okay, great, let's go. Because it's getting too hot here. They're telling me about my drinking. And drink Canada dry. Here I come. And we go to Canada, and we end up in Alberta, Canada, which is freezing. It's the prairies. We landed, it was minus 40. I realized I had made one of my many mistakes in judgment. And by this time I'm shaking so much I can't get my drink up in the morning, and I realize I have a Valium deficiency, so because I'm bright I get a job as a pharmaceutical rep. And I don't know how I got through that, but I did, and they gave me a car. My territory was Southern Alberta, Saskatchewan and British Columbia, which is massive territory. And this nice man I'd married, I only married him to get into Canada. I was able to make amends later. And he would stay home and look after my kids. And I'm a blackout drinker on the road. And I get into a lot of trouble. And eventually I sent that man away because I'm a user. And I sent him away. And it's just me and my 2 little boys. And my family came. I don't know, has anybody in here suffered from alcoholic telephonitis? Alcoholic telephonitis is a phenomenon that never attacks in the day. It usually approaches around midnight. When you're sitting alone with your jug and you want to call somebody and tell them how you've been screwed by the world. But you don't want to call anybody nearby because they might come and disturb your isolation. And I used to call my family in Scotland, and I've got these 2 aunts, and they would go anywhere. My family's very tribal. They would go anywhere to help us, and they came to Calgary and put me in detox. And it was just me and 5 Native Canadians at the time in detox, and I had DTs. And they used to hold my soup to me and my coffee. And when I had a seizure, they'd try and put belt in my mouth. And when I had DTs, I don't know if you know a tune called Ravel's Bolero. I used to hear Ravel's Bolero. Dun, 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 and I used to see ants marching across. It was quite fascinating, really. But anyway, they were very kind to me. They told me they drank because their spirit was broken. And I realized at some level my spirit was broken. And it was only later when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous I realized about the spiritual malady. And I got out of there, and my family thought I was cured because I was freed from alcohol, and they went back to Scotland. And it was me and my 2 little boys. And I decided I was going back to Jamaica. I'd been out of Jamaica 2 years. The children's father hadn't sent any child support. And I know my boys wanted to be near their daddy because they loved their daddy. And I went back to Jamaica, and unbeknownst to me, my 11-year-old son, no child should ever have to do this, he wrote to his daddy and said, Daddy, when I come back to Jamaica, I never want to live with Mom again because I love her, but she's a terrible drunk, Daddy. And she's going to kill my brother and I driving drunk in the car. And she brings people home at night, men home at night, that we don't know. And after a week in Jamaica, I asked to get my children back, and he said I wasn't getting them back. And he said he'd put my son on the stand. And I wanted to die. I was done. I was done. Done. I can't live without my children. And that is a great conundrum and bafflement to me. I love my children with every fibre of my being. And yet I'm an alcoholic mother. I never physically abused them, but I am an alcoholic mother. And I never gave him the safety and the security that my little boys deserved. And he could. So I decided I was going to kill myself. And it wasn't a cry for help. It was just me and this little place in Hope Pastures that I had rented. And I went and took 2 bottles of Valium and 2 bottles of 151 proof rum. I don't remember how much I took. And I just remember getting in oblivion. I want oblivion. And as again, this God sent someone. They phoned me, called the ambulance, took me up to the hospital in Kingston. They pumped out my stomach. And I was so angry at being alive. And today I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to have been alive, because I cannot imagine what my sons would have gone through if I had succeeded. You know, we alcoholics are hard to dead. We do not die easy. You know, I love it when people say, if I drink again, I'll be dead, Mary. I say, you wish. You wish. So then, I ended up living in an old rundown hotel in Kingston with a lot of expats from Texas and all over the place. And there were people who had come to Jamaica to make their fortune and ended up drunks. And we're living in this old rundown hotel in Kingston. And together. And I would find a guy and him and I would have a couple of drinks and he'd begin to look so good. And he'd tell me I looked beautiful. And him and I would wander off into the enchanted cottage. The only thing is the sun comes up. The pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization of being with someone I don't know one more time. And on one such morning, as if prearranged, as fate would have it, I was walking out of there with my escort. And car passed by with my ex-husband, my 2 sons. I wasn't allowed to see his new wife and their baby. The word shame doesn't do it justice. A desire for death. What's happened to my life? What's happened to my life? Is this me? And he came a couple of hours later and brought all the 2 years child support in cash and threw it at me and told me if I don't get off the island, he'll kill me. And I didn't know where to go. I couldn't go home. I'd lost my children. Nobody knew where I was. I was too ashamed, so I decided to go to Miami and drink myself to death. I didn't know anybody in Miami, and I went there. I got a little place in Hialeah, a little apartment, and I drink and pass out. I wanted to just drink myself to death. I didn't want to throw myself off a building because I might hurt myself. Do you know what I mean? No, I mean, I know that's alcoholic reasoning, but, you know, we want to die peacefully. I want to die, you know, with a little drinky poo. And what would happen is I'd drink, pass out, I'd leave the door open, and they'd come in and steal my furniture and steal my clothes, steal my jewellery, steal me. And in the end, I had no money left. And I got thrown out the apartment. I just went one day and the door was locked. I had everything in there. My passport, my passports. It's another story. And I didn't know what to do. And I ended up at the bottom of Lincoln Road on Miami Beach. And my life down there was like going through a sewer in a glass-bottom boat. And that's all fifth step stuff, though, isn't it? It is amazing what we can come back from. It is amazing what this program does. This program raises us from the gutter. And again, to me, another God thing. There was an old woman called Joyce McNeil, an old English woman that used to live in Jamaica. and she now lived in Fort Lauderdale. And she came to visit her friend in Miami Beach, and she saw me. And she knew my family because they used to come to Jamaica. She said, your family's looking for you, your father's died. Come, I'm going to help you. And she called my family, and my aunts came again and wept when they saw me. My feet, I don't know if anybody feet swelling here when they were drinking. My feet were so swollen I could only get on these plastic flip-flops that I had tied to my feet. And because of the dirt and the sweat, they had to be dug out the soles of my feet. That's where alcohol took me. Every year I go back to Scotland, they say, how's your feet? And they wept. But they came and got me and took me back to the apartment, got my passport. And I didn't want to go back to Scotland. I couldn't face my mother because my father had died. My father, who was such a brave man, my father fought in the war. He was in Dunkirk. A great man. A brave man, and I killed him. My mother said he got up at 3 o'clock one morning and said, I don't know where my lassie is. I don't know where my grandchildren are. I'm going for a walk. And he dropped dead in the street. At the same time I was living in the street, and I didn't know. And I couldn't go and face my mother and my beloved brother. So I went back to Canada. And a man tried to help me, John. He, my third husband, and he's the one that eventually got me to AA. And he married me. I have to say he married me because I don't remember much about that. But unfortunately, I tried to kill him. And he took me to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist started putting me in. I was treated as a manic depressive for 4 years on lithium. And I was what they call a retread in the mental health system. And I'd go in there, and they'd give me all this medication. I'd come out, and I wouldn't drink because I was so filled with medication. Then I'd drink, then I'd get into trouble, then I'd be back in again. And then they do the same thing over and over and over again. The last time I was there, I was taken by the police, and I was in a lot of trouble. And I don't remember, it was a 3-day blackout, and it was a police report, and you can't trust them. They exaggerate. But the brilliant psychiatrist I had that had been so kind to me, Dr. Milliken, I'll never forget him, because he said, you know, Mary, your lawyers asked me to write a letter to the court. He said, and I'm going to do that. He said, but what we've realized, the team that's been working with you for these 4 years, is that we've totally misdiagnosed your case. He said, it's what I'm going to tell the judge and what I'm going to tell you now is that you've got 3 psychiatric disorders. 1, you're a chronic alcoholic. 2, you have an abnormal personality. And 3, you're a depressive. And that just about describes the illness of alcoholism, doesn't it? And he said, when you're here, we're going to send you to AA meetings. And I thank God for the people that bring AA meetings into the institutions and into the mental hospitals and into the psych wards. And I went and I used to sit, and they used to say to me, Mary, do you have hope? I said, I have no hope. But I was filled with medication. But something stuck. Anyway, I got out of there. The judge called me a tragic social circumstance. I got through all of that, and then one night I'm sitting drinking myself sober, and I pick up the phone and I phone AA. 3 o'clock in the morning. Your American poet, Scott Fitzgerald, who died of alcoholism, said, in the real dark night of the soul, it's always 3 o'clock in the morning. You remember 3 o'clock in the morning? The hands just seemed to stop at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I called Stan at 3 o'clock in the morning. He was a Métis, M-E-T-I, native Canadian, French. He came and he 12-stepped me. And for the first time in my life, at age 40, someone spoke the language of the heart. Someone at last I had found, searching but not finding understanding anywhere. I found it in Stan. And I identified with Stan. And he said, tell me a little bit about you, and I did. And he said, I think you're one of us. And nobody had ever said that to me before. And I said, Stan, I know I'm an alcoholic, but I'm also nuts. I have a psychiatric report that says I'm nuts. He said, Mary, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are like 12 adjustable wrenches if any nut that comes through the door. And I had one slip. My dry date is the 10th of August, 1984. On the 9th of August, 1984, a little gal spent the night with me. And she said, the next day, I'm going to leave you now because my sponsor said you're a loser. And I only stick with winners in Alcoholics Anonymous. But before I go, I'm going to ask you to kneel down and say the 3rd step prayer that Charlie did so beautifully for us. And I said, I kneel for nothing. And something said, think of your children's eyes. Bill Wilson said it is by repeated humiliations that we become humble. I needed repeated humiliations to get down on my knees that day. And I repeated the 3rd step prayer after her. To a God I did not believe in. And I had a vision. And what that vision was, the previous Christmas, I'd just got out of the psych ward one more time and called Jamaica and said, can I see my children for Christmas? He said, if you can, I'll check up on you every day in the hotel to make sure you're not drinking. I'll have someone bring the boys to the airport. He put my sons on the phone and they said, Mommy, we can't wait to see you. What do you want for Christmas? Mommy, you had a nervous breakdown again. I'm okay. I'm coming. I was on medication. And I got on the plane in Edmonton, Alberta, changed planes in Toronto to get a flight to Kingston, bought a bottle of vodka, and drank it on the flight. When I got off the airport in Kingston, Jamaica, my son said, hi, Mommy, and I dropped down drunk at their feet. And the person who brought them said, you won't be seeing your mother this trip. And I remember lying on the ground, looking at my children being led away, looking over their shoulder at me with the eyes of the child of the alcoholic. The broken promises and broken dreams, one more time. And that's the vision I had on the 10th of August, 1984. And from that moment to this, I've had no desire for a drink. None. By the grace of God. I am so grateful. I am so grateful. Perhaps the depth of my gratitude is the depth I'm coming from, but I just know this. I thank God. I don't know if I'm right here, but I often think about it. I was born in 43. AA was born in 35. It could only have started in the US of A, I think, because it would not have been allowed in the UK at that period to have a God of your own understanding. Isn't that phenomenal? That Bill and Bob, a stockbroker and a proctologist, God has a sense of humor. He knew who was dealing with his proctologist. I'm always in awe of it. And I thank God I got the opportunity because loving people came and spent the time with me. I didn't know how to pray. I didn't know what to do. And my friend said, my sponsor Carol at the time said, Mary, get up in the morning, get down on your knees and say, whoever's keeping Carol sober, keep me sober. And then get down on your knees at night and thank God who's keeping Carol sober for keeping you sober. And I did that. And I heard about it. They told me 90 meetings in 90 days. If you don't like what you hear, we'll gladly refund you your misery. Take the cotton batting out your ears and stuff it in your mouth. You can't talk for a year because you don't know nothing. You are impulsive, compulsive, and repulsive. And you need rehabilitation. These are the sweet things that were told me. And and I came in and I followed instructions. I would go to 2-3 meetings a day, and I was just so happy. I just loved it. And and I tell this story all the time, but it's just so important to me. You know, one day, the messenger comes in various shapes and sizes, and one day I heard this old woman from the Northwest Territory speaking, and she was the most spiritual woman I'd ever heard. But she was saying things like, as a drunken woman, I never went to bed with an ugly man, but I sure woke up with a few. She said, but I don't do it anymore because I am a lady in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I went up to her and said, Helen, who is this God you have? I'm looking for a God. And she said, Mary, my God's called Harold. I said, Harold? She said, you know that prayer, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Morning, Harold, you know. Today, as it promised in the book, the consciousness of the presence of God has become the greatest fact of my life today. I got right into AA, and I did a 5th step and 4th step very quickly because I hated myself, because I knew I could not stay conscious. I have to stay conscious. I couldn't stay conscious because of all the things I'd done. I'd done a lot of things, and I'd created a lot of problems, and I'd hurt a lot of people. And I had to do that 4th and 5th very quickly. And I got on, and I did my amends. I flew up and down. I did everything I had to do. And my son was going to Toronto when I was almost a year sober, and Intergroup, God bless them. My sponsor called Intergroup, and 2 people from Intergroup came and got met me at the plane and took me to the YWCA. I got settled in Toronto. My boy came. I got an apartment. I got a little job. Had my boy for a year. Flew down and saw my other boy. Flew to Scotland, made amends, and my mum was dead before I could make amends to my mum. But I did what I was told to do, to try and make it right and be there for my brother. And I made every amend I could make. You know, I hear people say sometimes I don't need to have them make amends, I just have to stay sober. That's a living amends. No, I'll tell you what a living amends is. It's after you've made your amends, you just keep sober. That's a living amends. You keep living sober. Then when I was I got married in AA, and that didn't work out too well because I loved John and he loved me, but we were both crazy. And we separated, stayed in the same building, and then I heard my son had been put out his father's house for trying to kill his stepmother and living with the old ex-mother-in-law, and my sponsor said, go back to Jamaica and make amends to the island. And I went back to Jamaica, lived with my old ex-mother-in-law. She always loved me. If you really want to know how you're doing, go and live with your old ex-mother-in-law. She'll tell you. And I stayed there for a couple of years and got active in AA and worked down there. And my sons, one of them went to Scotland, one went to Broward Community College. That's what they wanted to do. And then they were coming back to me. And that's when I got Clancy from my sponsor. And I'm so grateful because Clancy saved my life. Clancy knew me very, very well. Clancy wouldn't put up with any rubbish from me. You know, I used to try and like I'd do something real stupid, and I'd be trying to explain to him what happened. And he used to say, do you know what it's going to be in your tombstone when you die? She died of explanation. And then I came back, and for 2 years, after 13 years, me and my 2 sons are living together. And it's so beautiful. It was so beautiful. And what a joy. And my husband I'd married, him and I had a legal separation, and we were in the same building, and one day I couldn't get him on the phone. I thought something was wrong. I said to my son, come upstairs. I had a key for the door. I tried the key in the door, and the door was bolted on the inside. And my neighbour and my son kicked down the door. And John was lying on the ground. He'd been lying there for 2 nights and 3 days. He'd had a massive stroke. And he couldn't speak, and he couldn't understand the spoken word. And he was in hospital for a year and a half. And they asked me if I'd take him home. That is a living amends. I was never there for my mum and dad. So I took John home. even though we were legally separated. And it was a joy. He could never speak again. There's only 2 words my husband can say, and I couldn't say them from the podium. But what they mean is take a journey. It was the most precious form of loving I've ever known, because John was childlike, and I thank God that I was able to do that. And when just before John died, I read him how it works and held his body till he grew cold, and God had me do something of value for another human being, and I'm so grateful for that opportunity. I'm so grateful. And my boys often got married. My eldest son got married in Vancouver Island. Vancouver's where they're going to be having the World Conference, you know. And he said, Mommy, would you come? Daddy's coming up from Jamaica, and you and my daddy will walk me down the aisle. And I thought, I've made amends to my first husband, but I don't know if I like him. You know, how much? I called Clancy. Clancy said, you will go and you will behave well, because I'll have people watching you. And and I was delighted to do it. But so my ex-husband comes up with his 2 daughters who have now been to finish in school, and his wife, and he said, my God, you look good. I thought a leopard couldn't change its spots. This Alcoholics Anonymous has done wonders for you. And I am in my AA Madonna stance, you know. Bless you, my child, you know. And you look wonderful. The girls are lovely. Your wife is really lovely, lovely. Inside I'm thinking, 20 years ago I hired 2 gunmen to shoot you. You were almost toast, my friend. I'm so glad I was drunk, too drunk to do it. Thank you, God. My youngest son got married in full Scottish dress in a Ukrainian Orthodox church and danced with me to a tune called Mama, and gave me 5 grandchildren. So I'll finish here with this. My life is beyond my wildest dreams. I have a life beyond anything I ever deserve. I have a life today where I can walk on the sunny side of the street, lift up my head and look people in the eye. I want to be kind and loving towards all. I do try. I want to be a producer of harmony rather than confusion, because I used to have an amazing ability to make benign, well-adjusted people behave like morons. And now I try and walk and create a little peace in the world. But you know, when Bob was talking about that rage thing that he had, I'll just share this with you. When I was 27 years sober, after John had died and everything, and I had to go back to work, and I was working for this woman who was there to test my serenity level. And I used to go in there and she would throw files at me. And I used to say to her, you shouldn't do that. You'll just upset yourself, because I needed the money. And I'm thinking, I'd like to put my arms, my 2 fingers around your neck and just go, like, you know. But that's not what I do. Clancy used to say, behave better than you feel. And I would behave better than I felt. And anyway, I don't know, one day, it must have been a bad spiritual hair day, I don't know. But I walked in there, and as I walked in the door, she threw a file at me. And it was just her and I in the office, and I went and closed the door, and I said, God, I'll see you when I come out. And I lost it. I had that rage that is like dynamite going, you know that blind rage where you just erupt? Horrendous rage. And I took her inventory from when she was born. And she's sitting cowering in the chair. And then it just stopped, like a switch going off. And she said, you should go home, you're not feeling well. I said, you go home, I've got work to do. And she ran out the door, and I got down on my knees and I wept from shame. I asked God to forgive me for treating one of his kids like that. I called Clancy. Clancy said, I told you. You're always staying in relationships past the expiry date. He said, I want you to go in the morning and make amends and give a week's notice, and I did that. But then I did a 4-step on that rage. What I found was that woman had made me feel the way I had felt long, long ago, powerless, trapped. And it had erupted in me because she reminded me of somebody. But I didn't know that till I did the work. And I was able to make... So you see, this work is never ending. Never ending. I'm going through the steps again with my sponsees in Canada, and I learn something every time. Because the personality change required for the recovery from alcoholism is a change of personality. We get it sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. But I truly believe we differ and grow every 5 years. I think we change and grow, change and grow. So I am so grateful. Bill Wilson said once that Alcoholics Anonymous is not a success story. Rather, it is a chronicle of our colossal human failure, turned to usefulness by the divine alchemy of a loving God. Again, I'd like to thank Tracy so much for being a great hostess. Somebody picked me up a couple of months ago, and I got in their car. They were my hostess, and they said, let's get you to the conference. Are you ready? I said, I'm ready. They said, hold on, honey. I thought, is that some kind of American car you blow in? And I didn't know it was a breathalyzer. I'd never seen a breathalyzer. And I'd like to thank Ben, Glenn, the committee, for what a job you guys did. I'd like to thank all of you for having me here. Thank you so much.